Springfield's Talk 1041. Good Monday morning, everyone. Welcome to the show as we stream live, KSGF.com. Of course, you can get us on the app, which I highly recommend downloading that app. You can catch any of the podcasts you missed. Of course, those are also Spotify, iTunes, just about anywhere and everywhere. You can find the program. This Friday, we've got the combination day. It is a day that we will have, of course, the live broadcast at Scramblers. It will be a Heroes Breakfast. Delta Roofing, Air Services, Heating, Cooling, Plumbing, Electrical, Warriors Journey, and Scramblers all chipping in together to buy breakfast for veterans. And we will have a happy hour as well, 4 to 6 at Vineyard Market. That is going to be all on the same day. This happens once a year at least because of the Black Friday, so things get knocked back a week in terms of the Heroes Breakfast, and so it'll be a busy one. We've got Santa's Angels underway as well. I did see an email this morning that said the kids from the Mexican Villa location have all been adopted, so we'll have to do a check and see how the others are doing as well. That's a pretty fast clip.
Yeah, it is. And we've already had gifts returned.
Yes,
so
things are moving along quite nicely.
I feel pretty good.
I wonder if some of it is because the weather's been so nice.
Maybe.
Now that changed.
Oh, yeah, just you wait. Just you wait, because it's a whole lot of grossness.
Oh, no.
I know.
Still yet to come?
Yes.
It was very cold. It just, it seemed to happen so sudden, and it seemed unfair, and then I tell myself, well, it is December.
Yep.
After all, and I suppose that that's a good time for those colder temperatures to make their way in, and what sort of wintry weather. We'll get to that coming up in a moment. There have been some real massive things that have been going on, developing over the last several days. I mean, you just want to categorize them. Of course, you've got the murder of what were targeted volunteer National Guardsmen in Washington, D.C., and the fallout from that. This is somebody that was imported in with the disastrous withdrawal of Afghanistan, and at the time there were a lot of people that it created a horrible situation, because on one hand we had promised those who risk their lives to help us, when this thing is all said and done, we'll take care of you. But because of the completely boneheaded fashion in which Biden did it, it made it really as difficult, if not completely impossible, to actually follow through on that promise. And so one of two choices were to be made. One, we, just don't allow those who were promised that they would be taken care of to actually make it into the country, just abandon them, which we randomly did, a lot of people, including Americans, or randomly let anyone in that wants in. And it, of course, was a bit of a combination of the two. The administration you look back on it, a complete embarrassment before the entire world. And the reckless way in which the administration was just almost, it was like they were trying to hit a certain number so that they could tout that we were taking care of those whom we had promised to take care of. And we've ended up with thousands of individuals that were considered to be potentially dangerous. And one of those individuals, of course, would carry out that attack in Washington, D.C., shooting two of those young people, Americans, who signed up and volunteered to be in Washington, D.C. as part of their National Guard duties. Now, of course, noting this reality is something that people on the left want to completely deny. It's the fault of guns. It's the fault of Donald Trump for trying to keep Washington, D.C. safe. Should have just left that district to the criminals, and then the National Guard members would not have been there, and then that Afghan individual would not have felt compelled to go to Washington, D.C. in order to kill them. So it's all Donald Trump's fault. So we got that going on. We've got the announcement that airspace is considered closed over Venezuela, and what apparently from Donald Trump was an offer to Maduro to get out with him, his wife, and his son. There was apparently, according to reports, some back and forth that involved request from the dictator that the Trump administration was like, no, not going to happen. And in what I would argue would be somewhat expected reaction, the dictator of Venezuela tried to get Trump back on the phone only to find that Trump wasn't answering. Trump is one that recognizes the importance of setting boundaries and that he doesn't mess around. And one of the ways in which our enemies have long been accustomed to dealing with the United States is in the name of peaceful resolution, we would allow ourselves over and over and over and over and over again to have these sort of scenarios drug out. So previous administrations would have answered the phone and okay, what do you want now? And then there'd be a new benchmark and so forth. And Trump is, I believe, setting the boundaries here and saying, no, we gave you an offer. You didn't want to take it. And so now this is becoming your problem. Not that there would not be potentially some other option to prevent what could be an escalation of a military action in Venezuela. Then at the same time, you have Democrats continuing to urge members of our military to disobey orders if they are, quote, illegal, while refusing to acknowledge that Trump or even point out that he's done anything illegal. Oh, we're just trying to make sure that they're prepared for the time that it does occur. Ironically, Mark Kelly, one of the Democrats who has been encouraging this sort of insubordination, actually argued that he never questioned orders when he was serving in Iraq. And I don't think he was trying to make that point, but I think the point he was trying to make is that, well, he never had to question orders because Donald Trump wasn't president. But he acknowledged, and we'll play the audio of it, that he never questioned any orders. So he's admitted that he never did what it was that he and other Democrats are telling members of the military they need to do. Then you have at the same time, these are all real massive things that are occurring. This scandal that has been exposed in Minnesota, in which taxpayer dollars were being funneled to individuals for fraudulent purposes up to and including terrorism. And this was money that was supposed to go to hungry children, and it was supposed to go to autistic children, specifically Somalians. The brilliance of funneling money away from those programs is if you try to, and this is already happening, say, hey, there's clearly a lot of fraud here, so we need to cut these funds off. We need to be more careful in distributing these dollars. You get accused of trying to starve children. You get accused of targeting people from Somalia who are here in the United States that simply want a better life for their family. You get accused of stealing money away from autistic kids and just trying to starve them to death. That's the beauty of the system of corruption that apparently Tim Walz has been operating out of his state. And whistleblowers are coming out. Whistleblowers are coming out and not only saying this is 100% Tim Walz, because Tim Walz knew about this, because we've been telling Tim Walz about this, hoping that he would collaborate with us to try and make sure those dollars were actually going to autistic kids and starving kids, and instead he turned against us. Because this is what the Democrat Party does in 2025. They only come to the aid and support and comfort of people who are in this country illegally or people who want to do harm to this country. Rarely, if ever, any longer, when they stand up to defend someone, is it an actual law-abiding American citizen that, God forbid, is trying to prevent corruption from occurring. Those are the individuals that get targeted. And apparently in Minnesota, according to the reports, and of all places, the New York Times finally did an expose on this, as it's been going on for years and years. Tim Waltz is the ringleader of such corruption. The Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line 417-447-KSGF. And I don't know that we're going to, let's just go ahead and jump to weather. I don't know that Angela has the updated news. So
Okay, well,
do not have confidence in it.
buckle up, guys, because it's a whole lot here. The first alert forecast from Ozarks First, meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today, we have a 60% chance of snow showers, freezing rain, and sleet likely before 3 p.m., and then a slight chance of snow showers after 5 p.m., otherwise cloudy skies with a high near 32. Tonight, a 50% chance of snow showers, mainly before 8 p.m., and then cloudy with a low around 20. For your Tuesday, partly sunny with a high near 40. And taking a look at Wednesday, partly sunny with a high near 45.
Trump gave Maduro ultimatum to flee Venezuela as the land operations loom. President Donald Trump delivering a stern ultimatum to Nicolas Maduro to leave Venezuela immediately before announcing the country's airspace should be closed. Per the Miami Herald, Washington's warning was delivered in a phone call to the capital and offered guaranteed evacuation for Maduro, his wife, Celia Flores, and their son, but only if the dictator agreed to resign on the spot. The conversation stalled, U.S. officials said, and within hours, Washington escalated dramatically. The ensuing impasse, a source told the outlet, was over Maduro asking for, quote, global amnesty for any crime he and his group had committed, and that was rejected. Oh, he must have been thinking of the previous administration, the way they love to hand all that stuff out left and right. Quote, second, they asked to retain control of the armed forces, similar to what happened in Nicaragua in 91. In return, they would allow free elections. The final issue was timing, according to the outlet, as Washington demanded that Maduro resign immediately. But that, of course, did not happen. So Trump went on to announce Saturday Venezuelan airspace would be considered closed in its entirety. The Herald also reported that Maduro government tried to schedule another call to Washington but received no response. According to a defense expert familiar with the country's military and state-linked cartel ties, Maduro and key players in his regime could now face their most serious threats yet. Vanessa Newman, who is a former diplomat for Venezuela, said, "I think the operations will start imminently." The clearing of the airspace, which, by the way, Trump has said, don't read too much into that. Newman says the clearing of the airspace is an indication and a very clear public warning that missiles might be coming to take out command and control infrastructure or retaliatory infrastructure. This will not be like breaking a jar into 1,000 pieces. This is where you can lift the concentration of power, and it's easier to manage. Noting that the targets have not been identified through covert operations over the last several years by people on the ground. They're well mapped. This is a capture or kill scenario, but there's a limit to how many people you can remove quickly. Again, yesterday, Trump told reporters aboard Air Force One not to read anything into his declaring Venezuela's airspace closed when asked if a strike was imminent. Now, as usual, the unfortunate consequence of the Democrats' inability, in particular, to see any issue for what it is that we don't really have any legitimate debate over this issue. This is the irony of the Democrats trying to cast doubt on everything that Donald Trump does, is that thinking people who are interested in what is actually occurring, whether it is a good or wise move, is it constitutional, recognize that Democrats never make any valid arguments in that context. And so there really aren't many, if any, voices that are giving any intellectual pushback on something that Trump is doing, Venezuela, for example, in the way that this approach has been occurring. And not even push, but just thought-provoking stuff. Because I know a lot of you are obviously this way, and I am. I want to hear devil's advocate. But the people who traditionally would be in the role of playing devil's advocate, Democrats in the media, are instead they're just going around talking about war crimes, and talking about why and how it is that some people in the military should just defy his orders, even though we're not saying that there have been any illegal orders given, but if there were, theoretically. And it just all becomes about how can we attack Donald Trump? How can we make Donald Trump look bad? And that denies the American people the ability to hear voices that may have differing perspectives based in any sort of intellectual thought process. And like I said, the irony is Democrats, their desperate attempt to get people to be opposed to Trump, particularly when it comes to how it is he's dealing with Venezuela, it is done in such a manner that intellectually approached people they just tune the Democrats out because there's nothing of substance there. And I, for one, particularly given that we're talking about taking some form of what would be obviously considered military action against a country, and there is no official declaration of war, but we haven't done that since World War II. The closest we came was the authorization of force that was given to Bush to invade Iraq, stopping well short of an actual declaration of war. Now, you do have, let's find, I've got just a number of stories. Tim Kaine, where did this story go? Well, Tim Kaine has said, I got my stories mixed up out of order here, that he is going to reintroduce a resolution that says that Trump, he's got to get permission from the Senate to do this, something that has occurred before, and it failed before, but Tim Kaine is saying, well, but it's different now because we're actually serious about it this time around, or something along those lines. Now, here's the thing that a significant portion of the American population believe is going on here, and that is that this is just about stopping drugs. that we have a drug problem in this country. We've had a drug problem for some time in this country. And here are some people that are importing drugs. And so Trump takes them out. There is so much more to this. And by the way, Congress, and we'll ask Congressman Burleson about this. The White House has been keeping Congress in the loop on this stuff and briefing them as to why exactly it is that they're doing what they're doing. So this is something that Congress, including these Democrats, have been in the loop on. And I think it's interesting that what they're not doing is out there saying that it shouldn't be done, but they're just trying to muddy the waters by saying, oh, it's a war crime, it's illegal, without, of course, citing the foundation for those accusations. But what they don't want to talk about is why it is that this is actually happening. And I suspect what's going to occur is at some point, well, I know this is going to be the case, all that information is going to come out. And I think for a lot of people, it's really going to change the landscape in terms of their assessment and recognition that this isn't just about some drug dealers that are trying to sell drugs into the United States, that this is part of a much broader, full-blown effort to slow walk war against the United States by perhaps a number of different interests, including China. And to do so on more than one front. We're going to take a break. We'll continue on. The Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line 447 KSGF. I'm Nick Reed. Penninger Honda, the Penninger family, the Happy Honda Days is still underway, and we've talked about that quite extensively. But one of the things I really want to focus on is for this week, Children's Miracle Network Miracle Week. That is this week again. And Penninger Honda supporting the local kids and families in need of medical care and financial assistance. Every dollar makes a difference. 100% of gifts go directly to the children. So here's some of the details. Every day, Children's Miracle Network hospitals at Cox Health makes meaningful differences in the lives of local children and families. During the first week in December, the impact is amplified through Miracle Week, a special time dedicated to raising funds that provide medical critical medical care and support when it's needed the most. The week, again, is through the 7th. Special Needs Fund offers direct financial assistance for medical needs not covered by insurance or Medicaid, such as prosthetics, wheelchairs, leg braces, hearing aids, prescriptions, and travel expenses for out-of-town appointments. Family Care Grants, providing financial support to families whose children are hospitalized or require specialized therapy. Educational programs includes campaigns like Teen Driving, Never Shake a Baby. Additional programs promote safety in areas such as car seats, water, bicycle, firearms, homes, farms, and infant care. The Care Mobile program, mobile health clinics offering screenings and immunizations to kids with limited access to care. The Child Life program, a dedicated team helping hospitalized children maintain a sense of normalcy, supporting emotional well-being, and hearing and school-based virtual visits, enabling children to receive care while at school if needed and return to class quickly. And so that is something that is important to Pinnegar. The Pinnegar family has been for some time, and again, while the Honda Holidays event still going on, including no payments for 90 days, that Children's Miracle Network Week is something that's very important to them. We've got a look at that weather coming up here in just a couple of moments. Yes, wintry mix perhaps, or perhaps not.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First, meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see a 60% chance of snow showers, freezing rain, and sleet likely before 3 p.m., and then a slight chance of snow showers after 5 p.m., otherwise cloudy skies with a high near 32. Tonight, a 50% chance of snow showers, mainly before 8 p.m., and then cloudy skies with a low around 20. For your Tuesday, partly sunny with a high near 40, and taking a look at Wednesday, partly sunny with a high near 45.
We're going over just sort of the basics of what is going on in Venezuela, and as an offer was made to Maduro to have safe passage out if he resigned immediately, and that was an offer made that he had immediately requested certain conditions with it that were turned down. And the airspace being considered closed over Venezuela now. People are beginning to pay a little more attention. And there's just, aside from legalities of it, in the minds of many people, there's a difference between taking out a boat that is in international waters heading to the United States with drugs versus actually firing missiles into the country. So this is, you're going to see a lot of people that are paying more attention. And unfortunately, there's not going to be a great deal of education going on because of Trump derangement syndrome. And these people they can't get past hatred for Trump long enough to actually assess what's going on and to give any sort of intellectual perspective that might vary from the Trump administrations. And so that denies all it's almost like having a one-party system in the sense that you don't have any real, true debate going on. It's all Trump is a war criminal, and that's it. Now, I think there's two main components to this. One is the deliberate importation of drugs into the United States in the first place. And one of the ways that some people look at this, or at least the way that they've been arguing it, is, well, that's not how you're supposed to do this. You are supposed to use the Coast Guard and follow them, and then turn on your sirens, and then request to come aboard, and then any of the drugs that you may find, you take those drugs from them and then arrest these individuals, and it becomes just essentially a law enforcement matter. When Trump weeks ago was asked, why don't you do it that way, his answer was one that was based in reality, and that is, that's how we've been doing it for decades. It doesn't work. That's why, short answer, it does not work. Trump is a believer that if you take an approach and that approach does not work, you do not continue to take that approach, you take another. Now, one may disagree with the current approach, but what one can't argue is that the previous approach worked. In fact, it's just ridiculous to even ask, why don't we just continue to do it the way we've been doing it? Just right out of the gate, the boats are faster than the Coast Guard boats. So they outrun us. When you look at the number of people that die every year because of these drugs, and you put it in the context of an act of terrorism, it changes your perspective. Look at September 11th. If we're talking about just numbers here, drug overdoses in this country yearly far surpass the number of people that died on September 11th, 2001 in this country. Far surpass it. This is one of the reasons drugs are imported into our country. This is why China's not doing it for the money. This is why China is one of the facilitators of this activity, because they have been slow walking a war against us deliberately in a number of different ways, and one of them is to weaken society by getting Americans addicted to drugs. Do you know what the penalty for drug use in China is? It is a severe reflection of the recognition China has about how drugs can weaken a society. This is why they are doing it. It's not for the money. It is to weaken the United States. In addition to those who don't overdose but become addicted, you're talking about so often a generational problem here. Kids raised in a household that are accustomed to that sort of culture oftentimes adopt it. So you're not only getting one generation addicted, or perhaps even to a position where they overdose, but you're affecting numerous generations. When you look at the impact on the number of individual lives that are damaged in a devastating way or even ended because of this form of terrorism, it is deadlier than 9/11. Now, it doesn't come across that way because of the visuals of 9/11, the planes and the towers and the falling, and it was an event that was that occurred within, a day. And it was such an anomaly in terms of what we were accustomed to seeing. And it was just so emotionally devastating that it has a much greater impact than the drug importation approach that the terrorists are taking. But reasonable, logical people can recognize that in terms of weakening a country, it is a more effective attack on the United States. Now, if we knew, let's say that instead of cocaine or whatever drugs they're importing into the United States, let's say it was sarin gas. And we knew that sarin gas was going to be released into a subway system or into a shopping mall or at some sort of festival in which tens of thousands of people would lose their lives. Would we have a problem taking these boats out? I suspect most Americans, sans the Democrats, would say, yeah, you obviously have to take those out because it only serves one purpose. The purpose of those boats is to get sarin gas into this, or anthrax, or whatever it is that you want to utilize in order to illustrate the point here, but some sort of deadly toxin whose purpose it is to kill as many Americans as possible. That's what is occurring. There is another component to this that involves what I guess one would consider the more traditional terrorism, and it is Cartel de las Soles, which is a foreign terrorist organization. And they are being bankrolled partially off of this. So not only do you have those who want to see the United States weakened, importing these drugs as a weapon in order to do so, at the same time, they are funding much of their other activities. I want to get to that part of it coming up. There's a piece Fox News had, and they spoke with a former Venezuelan diplomat regarding just the landscape, and it's not overly deep, but it certainly is deeper than what we're getting in terms of information with these Sunday morning talk shows and just the accusations of Donald Trump being some sort of war criminal. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. I want a great homeloan.com. All of your home loan needs, refinancing, just advice. Information is powerful. Whether you use it or maybe if you use it poorly, it can be powerful in the wrong way. But the characters in their team, this is what they do. They understand the landscape, and they also, they see so many of us try to, I don't even want to use the term game the system, but, we're going to wait until interest rates get to here because that's going to save money when it comes to taking out a home loan. But they know the realities, how that oftentimes isn't the case and can be counterproductive. Utilize them for information. There's a bunch of information on the site itself. It's not just a plug in your info to get the process started. There's a lot of informational stuff on the site that can be helpful to you, but that includes their contact info, and they're always eager to answer any questions you may have, whether that is a refinancing or maybe a reverse mortgage, exactly what that is. What does that look like? You don't even have to have your home paid off for that to come into play. I did not know that until one of the characters mentioned it one day during the show. I want a great homeloan.com. It's where you go, where you get started. Talking about the stuff going on with Venezuela, I'm just throwing out thoughts on this thing. I don't have any sort of goal to make people think that whatever is going to happen, because we don't know until it does happen, but to what extent we do take military action against Venezuela, I'm not here to convince you that it is the right action. Honestly, sometimes you don't know until it plays out. And if it goes horribly wrong, then in retrospect, yeah, that probably wasn't the best idea. But look at Iran's a great example of this. That turned out to be a pretty swell idea. Retrospect. But what I am trying to do is put out some information that maybe you weren't aware of, or just perspectives that go through my mind. And, with the running of the drugs into the United States, again, I see that, knowing what the goal is, the point here, is it is the ultimate degrading of America's might through forms of terrorism. And one of those is just to get the drugs here to destabilize our culture as best as possible. And it's part of the reason China's behind it. And when I think about it in that context, it's a bit different. When I recognize that if the amount of people that are going to overdose due to these drugs in a year's period of time, if that were translated to the number of people at a festival that they were going to release some sort of poison gas at and kill that same number of people, we would obviously think about it as some terrorist attack that we should take those people out. Well, the drugs are doing the same thing. And that's one of the major goals of the drugs, is to do just that. At the same time, and I'm going to read to you some of the quotes from a former Venezuelan diplomat by the name of Vanessa Newman. And she talks about the Cartel de los Soles, which is a foreign terrorist organization. And she notes this cartel turned Venezuela's main oil company into a narcotics trafficking money laundering operation, using the company's access to international finance until it was sanctioned. Newman, who has worked with governments on countering transnational organized crime linked to the group, explained, going on to say they were using Venezuelan military jets to bring cocaine in from Colombia, process it in Venezuela, and then move it into Central America, and then from there even further into Europe. Jet pilots were making lots of money off of that, and they've tortured people. They target people, anyone who tell on them, they're disappeared. They're now one of the prime drug trafficking networks in the United States and Europe. They use their military positions, including their military-to-military relations, to grow and accelerate those movements. So what you've got here is serious inroads that are being made by our enemies utilizing their military. Again, we have these mind blocks against creative new ways that people who want to harm us go about harming us. One of the conclusions from the 9/11 Commission is that never again would we be caught off guard. Never again would we confine our understanding of attacking the United States to the traditional ways. And we recognized all these signals that we missed that were going on right under our nose because they weren't the traditional way of planning an attack on the United States. And we, other than the Trump administration, just even culturally in this country, we are right back there again, not recognizing what's going on. In September, to give you an idea, I think a lot of people, oh, well, Trump, he just designated them as a terrorist organization, so he could have justification to go after them. In September, the entire European Parliament voted in favor of the EU designation of the organization as a terrorist organization. So this isn't some random designation coming from Trump to justify his action. This is a serious terrorist organization that has been doing a level of damage to the extent that all of European Parliament has voted them as a terrorist organization. Newman added the Cartel de los Sols is also a key collaborator and financer of Hezbollah, and some of the drug money has been used to fund terrorist attacks that have killed American citizens, even in the Middle East. The U.S. has also ramped up a military and intelligence campaign targeting drug trafficking networks, obviously linked to Venezuela, including strikes on, suspected narcotic boats. Newman says the decision is President Trump's because when he says go, we go, and nobody knows when he will say that. He has mobilized so many assets down there, but what President Trump is doing now is long overdue. She added the timing is right now because even Maduro's biggest backers, Russia and Iran, are both on their back foot, and China will not go that far into backing Maduro as it has bigger and broader interests throughout the region. Also noting that Maduro is also weakened because his partners are weakened and have their own issues to deal with, and that we also now have a concentration of power and deep repression within the country that's quite unified, which means it's easier to flip. Newman identified others in the regime who may be targeted, and those are people within Inner Circle. Specifically noting the head of Venezuela's counterintelligence agency by the name of Granco, noting one of the reasons Granco is an important figure is that he's one of the reasons why they haven't capitulated and why there has not been a military uprising because of the brutality of the counterintelligence that they do to their own military, and hundreds of soldiers are tortured. That said, the Venezuelan people have made it clear they want Maduro out and fought democratically but lost. Again, my point isn't to take those who are opposed to the approach that we're taking and to get you to switch your mind to think that this is the best action to take and the necessary action to take. There is just, unfortunately, so little actual information that is available. There's a lot of information that is not available. Congress has been briefed on that, on those things, at least to some extent. We don't have all of the full information, but there is a lot of available background and just context that we're not getting on this because, again, well, Trump is evil, and that's all we need to know, and he's the one doing it, so he's a war criminal. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Pierman Roofing Company talk and text line. I agree that the illegal drugs is a war against America. The difference between it and, say, anthrax is the drug is a decision made by those ingesting it, whereas anthrax is a direct attack. That is a difference. So then therein lies the question. And I think it's a legitimate question to explore. Should that make a difference in our approach? Should the United States, knowing that the purpose of this is to weaken the United States in a number of capacities, while at the same time funding terrorist activities, including that of Hezbollah, that have, according to the reports, been directly responsible for the deaths of American citizens, should, given that it is something that people who are either addicted to the drugs or they want to, sell it themselves, that it's something that they are welcoming and actively participating in, does that mean that we just don't do anything? For some people, that might be a distinction that requires a different approach. I think intelligent people, some could argue that it's even more deadly because, to the point of the person who texted in, these are people that are actively welcoming their participation in the demise, the set goal demise of the United States of America. And that makes it even a smarter, on their part, and more lethal approach because it's welcomed by those who have become addicted to either the drugs or the cash that they can make off selling the drugs. So yeah, it is different. But if it is just as lethal or even more lethal, do we not still approach it in the same way? And I'm not arguing one way or the other. I think these are just important things to mull over. News in 60 seconds. There's one other little angle to this Venezuelan approach, and that is a report that is coming out of left-wing outlets, and so it's really drawing the lion's share of attention, and that is a report that there was an attack launched on one of these boats, and that a couple of people originally survived it, and that Pete Hegseth ordered them killed. And so the way this is being portrayed is that these were survivors, and this is a war crime because individuals that were looking to surrender, which how it is that we're supposed to know that. I think it's, again, all the benefit of the doubt is always given to the bad guys. I mean, that's the approach when it comes to anything dealing with Donald Trump. And whoever the bad guy is in the scenario, they have to get the entire benefit of the doubt. So if you have these narco-terrorists that are terrorists and they survive an attack on them while they are attempting to import drugs into the United States, and then there is a subsequent second missile that's fired that takes them out. These were just, probably two guys just getting their life together, probably trying to pay off student loans, or who knows the story that the left would come up with. And Trump was asked about this, and Trump said, talk to Pete. Pete said that's not how it played out, and I believe him. Now, there could be a lot of nuance there. There are conceivably scenarios in which those who might be, I think the imagery they want you to have is that these two individuals, they survived, and here they were off in some sort of life raft and signaling for help. We give up, we surrender. And Pete Hegseth was like, no, take him out anyhow. Which, by the way, I think legitimate people could say, yeah, I support that as well, because this is, at this point, about a message that we're serious about this stuff. And if you are caught running drugs into the United States of America as a terrorist organization, we will kill you. And simply because in our first attempt we did not succeed, that does not mean that there will not be a follow-up. I think reasonable people can also, I'm really playing a lot of both sides today. Some reasonable people could say, no, that's not how that's supposed to work. Okay. Again, unfortunately, we are denied that sort of intellectual conversation because the people who hate Trump just hate him, and their argument is Donald Trump is evil, Donald Trump is a war criminal, and there's no real nuanced intellectual discussion about so much of this. And that's not good. This is part of the reason that the founders saw and understood the importance of the right to free speech, to have these conversations. And it's something that we just increasingly lack with at least one of the political parties. Not solely, but to a large degree. All right. What this note? Are we good to do news and then the break? Is that?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right.
He just has a flight that he has to catch.
Oh, okay.
So.
All right. Well, let's go ahead. We're going to get Congressman Burleson. We'll just ask him a few quick questions as he's got a flight. But I do want to get the news, and then we'll do weather and just 2-minute break, and then will that time out?
That works out. In the first alert forecast from Ozarks First, meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see a 60% chance of snow showers, freezing rain, and sleet likely before 3 p.m., then a slight chance of snow showers after 5 p.m., otherwise cloudy skies with a high near 32. Tonight, a 50% chance of snow showers mainly before 8 p.m., and then cloudy with a low around 20. For your Tuesday, partly sunny with a high near 40. And taking a look at Wednesday, partly sunny with a high near 45.
We're trying to connect up with Congressman Burleson. I think he's at the airport. Oftentimes, we have this timed out just perfectly as he's going through security. And I don't know why we do that, but nonetheless, that's sometimes how it falls. So we will see if we are going to be able to get connected up with him here sometime within the next 10 minutes or so. I want to note one other aspect regarding, and I see these headlines, questions swirl around targeting of boats. These Democrats and even some of these Republicans that are acting as if we're in new territory here are so full of crap. The previous couple of administrations, well, not Trump's, but Obama in particular, he was the drone president, using drones to target people, individuals. Not in international waters, mind you, but in sovereign countries, some of which were actual American citizens. And we know about this. This is the extra appalling part about it. Because the New York Times did a very lengthy piece on this very fact. Now, they didn't do it to make him look bad. They didn't do it because this is new territory, and what about the rights of these individuals, and who does he think he is to handpick people that he believes might be a danger to the United States, and so he uses a drone to take them out? No. It was to make him look strong and powerful in a fight against terrorism. This was the lead up to his running for re-election. And there were internal concerns within the administration that he looked weak when it came to dealing with terrorism. And so, in an effort to rewrite that narrative, the New York Times did this lengthy piece about, and they characterized it accurately so as uncharted territory for the United States, but it was done in a Lewis and Clark style way. I mean, it was just so profound that this man was taking that power upon himself, all for the protection of this country. It was just, it was a real moment of reflection as to how fortunate we were as a country to have someone that was willing to take that on. So every Tuesday, the, quote, intelligence community would come to him with a list of people that they felt probably should just be killed without charge or trial, some of which, again, American citizens. And their clever way of avoiding any sort of potential legal problems for Obama, instead of him picking which ones to kill, he picked which ones not to. And this was done weekly. The Democrats did not care. You had a few human rights organizations that pitched a real fit about it. Do you know what else the Obama administration did? They changed the definition of what fell within a potential terrorist. That way, they could bring down the number of civilian deaths. Obama wasn't killing less civilians. He just changed the definition of what was considered a civilian, and the burden of proof switched from, if we couldn't prove that these were actual terrorists, then they were labeled as potential civilians. His administration switched it to it had to be proven after the fact that it was an innocent civilian for that to be counted as an innocent civilian. So anytime you hear, Mark Kelly or, any of these Democrats acting all high and mighty and just so concerned about what it is that Donald Trump is doing in this unprecedented fashion, what Trump is doing pales in comparison to what Obama was doing. Pales. That's why you can't believe these people. They're such liars. And the media right in there with them. It is useless listening to those individuals get on these programs and spread disinformation. I mean, it's useful to the terrorists. And let's not forget the Biden administration with the embarrassingly disastrous withdrawal of Afghanistan. One of the criticisms against the way that he withdrew is that all of our intel, the assets that we had, the ability to monitor what was going on the ground there was going to be greatly diminished because of the way that we withdrew. And within a week of the withdrawal, there was a drone attack on what we were told were terrorists. And the Biden administration went around bragging, see, it did not diminish our intelligence capabilities, until it came out that it instead was a station wagon filled with kids and volunteer workers. Any hearings on that? Any concerns about Biden using drones in order to take out children in a station wagon that was delivering food supplies as part of a volunteering effort? No, of course not. So forgive me if all of this hand-wringing coming from the left about Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth taking out narco-terrorists, if it just doesn't have much of an impact on me. Congressman Burleson joins us this morning, and we'll get right into just like to get your thoughts on the latest. And I know a lot has developed when it comes to Venezuela over the weekend, including reports that the Trump administration offered Maduro a way out. Didn't happen. Airspace being declared as officially closed. And of course, Donald Trump's a war criminal is what we take away from the left on this. What are your thoughts? And also any sort of briefings? It sounds as if Congress is being kept to some degree in the loop on all this.
I'm sure that there's members of the House Armed Services Committee or in Intel that are being kept in the loop, and probably you don't really want to give everybody in the House some of this
Right.
intel because you got people like Ilhan Omar that are members of Congress, sadly. But yeah, I think I feel confident that they are at least bringing in the people in those committees that have a need to know. Um, to me, that it's telling that Trump reached out and offered him a way out. And this guy is basically Pablo Escobar,
Right.
except it's more powerful because he's taken control of an entire country, and it's illegally controlled. He's not democratically elected. He's no longer democratically elected, and he's doing massive damage to the United States, to our citizens, to us economically. He's become this is basically Kennedy and the Bay of Pigs, the Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm sorry, this is the Cuban Missile Crisis, but today, because you've got China working with Venezuela to set up basically a structure to kind of dominate South America, and on top of that, they're funding a lot of their activity through the drug trade.
Do you? I think that if there are missile strikes, which it sounds as if that is a reasonable expectation that may happen, should Maduro not take his ticket out of there or get out of there. I think Americans are going to start paying a little closer attention, and for a lot of them, they're going to recognize this isn't just about. I think they think it's just drugs. They're just drugs being sent off. They don't understand exactly what's going on out of Venezuela, and I think that a lot of these Democrats that are portraying this as simple drug running, they know better than that. They know what has been going on and how these dollars will in turn go to organizations like Hezbollah and actually fund terrorism against the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of the human trafficking that's occurring is being funded by the drug trafficking industry in Venezuela, and then they're obviously making money on trafficking humans as well. So it is. What's happening down there is something that we can no longer continue to ignore, and because of the impact that it's clearly had on the United States. And I think that for me, I like I have no problem when a president wants to use a show of force in order to send a message, a diplomatic message. For example, Iran.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way that Trump handled Iran was perfect. He sent the message that our policy was clear for decades that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapons program. They did, and they continue to do it. We made it very clear, and then they literally told them we're going to bomb these facilities so that no one will die, and then they bombed the facilities. That's what it appears that this is Trump. The way Trump is handling Maduro is basically telegraphing, if you don't change, this is what we're going to do. It's not like we're sending in troops. We're going to take aggressive action so that your behavior ends.
We're talking with Congressman Burleson. I forget if it was weekend. I think it was prior to the weekend. The individual that came here from Afghanistan as part of the Biden program after the withdrawal of Afghanistan, targeting 2 individuals in the National Guard. This is what many people warned would very likely happen, that because of the lack of any legitimate vetting process and just accepting sort of almost randomly people in from Afghanistan while randomly not accepting others in, that it was it was a welcome mat for those who would like to do harm to the United States. And now we have seen that, whether that was the original intent or this is something that over time has developed. But it's clearly what many people had worried about in terms of national security. Yet somehow, well, I've seen some Democrats say, oh, it's because of our Constitution, gun laws, even though I'm pretty sure what he did in Washington, D.C., not allowed to do according to the law. But also it's Donald Trump's fault because he has National Guard in Washington, D.C. to begin with to try to clean it up and improve the quality of life for people there. And so he's to blame for it. It's never the policies that make these things possible, or even oftentimes not the person who actually carries out the crime.
Yeah, and this is not the only incident. There was a person that was arrested not too far from the White House in his apartment, making a bomb, and it was on like an online forum talking about it, and that was an Afghani national. So I think the intelligence community may not, clear, they don't know everybody, but they do know quite a few people. And I think part of this problem is that they didn't just inherit really bad policies from Biden. They inherited a very rotted out intelligence community that is not doing their job and following up on activity. And so I think what's going to end up happening is you're going to find out that these names, some of the names of these people that have been known, that they were already reported and known threats, but there was no activity being done under the Biden administration, and then the Trump administration inherits this, and it's a cancerous system. So I think that they're going to have to focus on these individuals that they know are a threat to the United States, and we need to double down and get these people out of this country.
Congressman Burleson, before we let you go, anything else that should be on our radar?
No, we're building up towards the fiscal situation. The government is funded until January 30th. So hopefully these next few weeks we will be passing some more appropriation bills and doing the job that we're supposed to be doing, and getting to the point where if there is any form of shutdown, it'll be a very limited amount of shutdown. But hopefully we pass all of the 12 appropriation bills by that point.
Congressman Burleson, thank you. Appreciate your time. Safe travels.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Couple reminders here before we hit traffic. Guns N' Roses going to be at Thunder Ridge Nature Arena Saturday, September 12th. Tickets go on sale this Friday at 10 a.m. You can go ahead and register to win a pair of tickets by going to KSGF.com. While you are there, we do have our Santa's Angels information, and this is sponsored by Wheeler Metals, incredible folks there, where we partner up with KVC Missouri in order to make sure that these kids that are in less than ideal, to put it mildly, situations have some sort of Christmas. And some of our partners in this, Crown Power and Equipment, Mexican Villa on South Campbell, and Greene County Freight and Food Sales, Pinnagar, Chevy, and Republic. Now, I did see an email this morning indicating that the Mexican Villa location had got all of the kids adopted out, so we'll make sure and confirm that, as well as any of the other locations. Things seem to be moving along a little quicker this time around, which is great. Within 24 hours of launching, we already had some of the gifts coming back in, and usually things are a little more delayed than that. So we love that, makes it great. Helps us feel confident that, as always, you all are going to come through. But in the meantime, the other locations, I have not received word that they have run out. Crown Power and Equipment, Greene County Freight and Food Sales, and Pinnagar Chevy in Republic. You can, for all of that information, including drop-off details here at the station, the gifts, and whatever else you may need to know, you can find it under Santa's Angels at ksgf.com.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see a 60% chance of snow showers, freezing rain, and sleet, likely before 3 p.m., then a slight chance of snow showers after 5 p.m., otherwise cloudy skies with a high near 32. Tonight, a 50% chance of snow showers mainly before 8 p.m., and then cloudy with a low around 20. For your Tuesday, partly sunny with a high near 40, and taking a look at Wednesday, partly sunny with a high near 45.
I wanted to share a review, Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty, this coming from Chad, and he notes, I cannot say enough good things about Emily Johnson. We were in the market for such a long time, but she was patient, helpful, went far beyond what any other realtor we've ever worked with has gone to make sure we got into a great home. She helped find the right contractors, get our place updated, made the paperwork a breeze. She negotiated hard when we needed it, and she got us a great price on a home our whole family loves. Thank you so much, Emily. And that is consistent with what you hear from others, whether somebody like that sounds like they were buying and selling, or maybe you're getting into your first home, or perhaps you're selling off a home that has been in the family for a long while and it's got emotional ties. You grew up in the house and you're an adult now, and mom and dad have passed on or no longer are able to keep up the house. It can be an emotional process. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty, all the way, 100%. You can find her at ksgf.com under Nick's endorsements. I wanted to mention, just to clear up any sort of confusion, apparently some people have stopped into our friends over at Wheeler Metals looking for a Santa's Angels tree. They are the title sponsor. They're sponsoring the event. They are not a tree location. Those are two separate things. And so the tree locations are at, you can see them at ksgf.com. Of course, we go through them every so often and run promos throughout the day listing a number of the locations. But Wheeler Metals is the overall sponsor. They wanted, our tree locations get eaten up pretty quickly because of repeat partners and just those who are sort of in queue, if you will. Let's say, hey, if something opens, we want to be part of this. And Wheeler Metals wanted to definitely be involved. And so that is why they had said, hey, can we, be just title sponsors of the event itself and help out in that way, and that's their place in it. So a huge thank you to them. But again, they don't have a tree with kids to be adopted. Now, just down the road from them on Kearney is Greene County Freight and Food Sales, and they do have a tree if there's still kids on it. So if you do go by Wheeler Metals, you're like, oh, that's right. They don't have a tree. Just keep going as long as you're heading west. And you'll find Greene County Freight, Food Sales. Find one there. All right, let's talk about this situation with the targeted shooting of two individuals from National Guard. This is something that, to some degree, has been predicted. When you bring in thousands and thousands and thousands of individuals that are virtually unvetted from a country that is a hotbed of terrorism, you're probably going to have something bad happen. It doesn't take an expert to figure that out. Now, according to the New York Post, the reality of some of these numbers that are being revealed is that there were more than 5,000 Afghans brought to the U.S. after American forces withdrew from the country that were flagged for national security purposes. More than 5,000. This, according to Department of Homeland Security data obtained by the New York Post. In all, the feds uncovered, quote, potential derogatory information on a total of 6,868 people who were allowed in under the Biden administration anyhow. Part of Biden's Operation Allies Welcome in 2021. Of that number, 5,005 came up with a national security concern, while 956 people had public safety concerns and 876 were flagged for fraud, according to the data. Department of Homeland Security provided the information to Senator Chuck Grassley, chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, after he posed a series of questions to the Homeland Security Department in May of last year. While various U.S. agencies were able to resolve many of the red flags, as of September, there were still 885 people with potentially negative national security information posing a possible threat. Following Wednesday's shocking ambush of two National Guard members in Washington, D.C., President Trump ordered a review of security and vetting protocols for migrants from 19 high-risk countries, along with all asylum cases approved by the prior administration. Now, as you can imagine, because it's standard, Democrats are going to be opposed to this. And this is Donald Trump's fault. But just the context of that is, of course, ridiculous. Donald Trump is the guy that told top al-Qaeda leaders, put him on notice. One in particular, giving him coordinates to his home where his family lived, saying, we will destroy you. If you harm from this point forward a single U.S. service member, it is over for you. That was in their territory. And do you know what happened for the next 18 months after that? Not a single service member was attacked by terrorist forces in Afghanistan. It stopped. That was in their home base. They took him seriously. We go from that, in which there was really no, at least in terms of the United States, we had no sort of ongoing military interaction with terrorists in Afghanistan. For all intents and purposes, it was relatively peaceful. And then the Biden administration came in, and he's like, let's just undo all that. And we know from there, he was warned not to do it. He was informed as to what a disaster it would be, and the decision was made anyhow. Now, how much of that was him actually making the decision versus, we just don't know. Because of, dementia and the fact that even when he wasn't suffering from dementia, he still was wrong on every foreign policy decision he's ever made, according to one of his own allies, Robert Gates. And you had just this insanely chaotic situation created unnecessarily by the Biden administration. He sat down, that interview with George Stephanopoulos, and George Stephanopoulos had noted, listen, there are folks that been promised they'll be taken care of course, the U.S. citizens. Biden said that we won't get out of there until all of those people, every single one of them is evacuated. That, of course, turned out not to be true. And I would argue, because of the public outcry of all of those people who had risked their lives to be allies to the United States, the Biden administration did a rush job of just getting as many Afghans in as possible to show, oh, look, we're taking care of all these people. Yep, we got them all taken care of. You may recall they were bragging about it being one of the most successful evacuation operations, militarily speaking, ever. Look how many people we got out. Now, when you look back on the situation in the moment, some could easily say, well, what did you, were we supposed to leave them there? Were we supposed to betray those individuals? This is unfortunately the rock and a hard place that Biden's decision put the United States in. Because of the chaos created, we had one of two choices. Either betray those individuals who had worked alongside the United States, leaving them to certain death or torture, or just get as many, anyone and everyone that came along and said, oh, no, I'm supposed to be taken care of, that we just get as many in as possible so that we could show that we were there in order to make good on our word. Neither of those options were good. But that's the disastrous result of Biden's decision. He left himself and this country's national security with no good option. And so that's how you end up with over 5,000 individuals that our own government said, yeah, these people, they could be a danger to national security, and they were flagged in anyway, or waved in anyhow. So now you have Trump saying, all right, we've got to figure this stuff out. We have to. And you have now Democrats, Van Hollen, one of the Democrats, warning that it's unfair to treat all evacuees as suspects just because one of them committed a horrible attack. I want to talk about that coming up here. We're going to get a break because I understand that smart people might find themselves moved by that argument. You recognize that a vast majority of the people who did make it here to the United States from Afghanistan are genuinely good people, members of the community. They're better neighbors than some American neighbors. And so that you think, well, gosh, you're going to send them back? Or what are we going to do? Like future potential still evacuees? Why is it that the Afghani community in the United States should suffer just because of this one individual? I can see smart thinking people asking that question, so I want to address it coming up next. Democrat Senator Van Hollen called blocking or punishing an entire group collective punishment after the shooting of 2 National Guard members in Washington, D.C. Now, this vetting process is something that has been virtually non-existent. Chuck Grassley has noted this is something that he told the Post, I spent years calling attention to the weak vetting standards in Operation Allies Welcome, despite considerable pushback from the Biden administration and many of my colleagues in Congress. Sadly, the past week's tragedy in Washington only validates my concerns further. I appreciate the Trump administration's efforts to respond to my oversight and restore order in the wake of the Biden administration's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan and the chaos that followed. There was another Department of Homeland Security IG report that found the agency had a fragmented process for dealing with potential security risks in the program. The Justice Department's IG, meanwhile, reported in June that 55 individuals who were on a terror watch list still made it into the United States as of May 2023. Some of them had been added to the list while the evacuation was taking place. Even while compiling its report, the IG's office noted the feds charged 2 Afghan nationals with planning an ISIS-inspired plot to try to disrupt the 2024 elections, specifically targeting Oklahoma City. And so the Trump administration is evaluating this and saying we've got the way that this has been operating clearly does not work. And as usual, non-Americans have the Democrat Party coming to their defense first and foremost. Van Hollen, U.S. Senator from Maryland, told ABC News that in the case of the suspect, there's no evidence that there was a system failure in terms of vetting. So apparently this is what Van Hollen considers a success. This is the way it's supposed to work. This was not a failure of the system. This is what should be expected of our system here in the United States of America. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't accept those standards. I don't believe that we should shrug our shoulders and say, well, the system worked and this is just what happens. So what? A couple of Americans get shot. A couple of individuals who have volunteered to protect the nation's capital are targeted and shot. That's not a failure, according to Van Hollen. Now, the argument that he and some Democrats that are making that I can understand, some people find to be effective, is saying that when it comes to any potential deportation of individuals that may be flagged as potential terrorists, that it's just not fair, it's not right to punish an entire group of people because of the actions of one. Not fair. Is it fair that Americans have to lose their lives or be shot because of is that fair? I'll accept the premise that, again, because of the way Biden withdrew us from Afghanistan, somebody's going to get the shaft. I'll agree that what has to occur, or what sort of changes that may occur, are not going to be potentially fair to someone. So the question is, whom is it that elected representatives and elected senators should be seeking to make sure the process is most fair? The Americans who they are supposed to represent, or people from other countries? This is increasingly the problem with the Democrat Party, that when it comes to trying to make things fair for people, it's always the Americans who are on the unfair side. It's the Americans who have to lose their lives so that we're not unfair to people from other countries who want to come here. I'm sorry that because of the disastrous withdrawal, that somebody may get treated unfairly. But when it comes to elected members of Congress and their decision as to whom it is that they are going to make sure the system is, quote, most fair, Americans or people from other countries, it should be Americans. That should be a default. And increasingly for Democrats, the default goes the other way. I'm going to jump to traffic here. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. This is a Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line. We have the same problem with government programs. Better to approve all the fraudulent requests than have one legitimate one question. And that is an accurate description of the approach that is generally taken. And it's one thing to be talking about or to recognize that the downside is fraud, the unfairness falls upon the taxpayers who pay for those government programs. But when you are talking about the refugees from terrorist nations, the unfair stick results in people dying. And I'm just frankly sick and tired of one of the two. I mean, it's like we have two political parties in this country. One that defaults to what is best for America and Americans, and then the other political party defaults to what is best for everyone that's not an American. Whether it's narco-terrorist out of Venezuela or wife-beating human traffickers who are in our country illegally, or terrorists from Afghanistan who utilized a fragmented system at best in order to get into the United States. I would also note this, when we talk about the need to vet people, and if there is a call to stop people from any particular country. So let's say the Trump administration, they say, okay, we're putting a ban. No more people, no more refugees coming in from Afghanistan until we figure out a way that we can properly vet people. Now, some, again, will say, well, that's not fair to all the innocent people. Okay, again, fair. When there is a report of a potential shooter or somebody is seen with a firearm and someone calls 911 because they're near a school, what do? They lock the school down. And that means no one comes in or out until they are confident that there is no reason for concern, and that includes parents. You don't get to go during a lockdown at a school because of a potential danger to the students and say, but my kid goes here, let me in. Now, that doesn't mean that every parent is assumed to be guilty. That's not why the lockdown occurs. It is for the safety of the kids. And if it's a bit of an inconvenience for parents who want to pick their kids up at the time, that is outweighed by the attempt to make sure children don't get shot. And it's the same thing when it comes to allowing people into this country. Especially when you know that there are those amongst them that want to do us harm. News in 60 seconds. I'm Nick Reed. For the absolute most premier landscaping and hardscaping service you can find in the Ozarks, Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor. Custom landscaping installation. Be a nice little just patio to sit out and watch the birds if you want, or something much more extensive. A complete outdoor living space with outdoor kitchen, outdoor entertainment, water features. I mean, you can just probably be just like Mar-a-Lago if you want it to be. I've never been there, but I'm sure there are some very nice outdoor accommodations. They do a tremendous job. I speak from experience. I had them do our back patio. You can see video of that on my Facebook page. And you read the reviews from so many people and just how far above and beyond. And the quality of work, and honestly, this may be irrelevant to a lot of people, but just the crew on time, professional, friendly, working hard, and it just seems as if increasingly it is more and more difficult to find that premier level of work. We have become accustomed to, well, what do you expect? That's just the way it is nowadays. Well, it's not always that way, and you can still get that same quality of work ethic that seems like our grandparents used to talk about, and it's been sort of presented as days gone by, but it does still exist. You just got to know where to find it. And when it comes to landscaping and hardscaping and everything within that scope, it's Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor. HunterHardscapes.com. Also Nick's endorsements at KSGF.com. Santa's Angels underway. We have our, so we've got 4 tree locations. I was checking through my email and saw one from over the weekend saying that the Mexican Villa on South Campbell, that location's kids have been adopted. So we also have trees at Crown Power and Equipment, Greene County Freight and Food Sales, and Pinnaker Chevy in Republic right on 60. Though they don't have a tree at their location, Wheeler Metals is the title sponsor, so a big thank you to them. And if you happen to be over at KSGF.com getting all the deets on that, you can get signed up to win tickets to see Guns N' Roses. They will be at Thunder Ridge Nature Arena Saturday, September 12th of 2026, with tickets going on sale this Friday at 10 a.m., We've got Heroes Breakfast this Friday. We have a happy hour this Friday at Vineyard Market in Ozark, just right off the highway. And it's, busy. So it's always that first Friday of December is always quite a busy one, and this shall be no exception. Oh, I wanted to mention, and I don't know that really a whole lot is going to come of it, but last week or the week before, the news broke that a judge tossed the case against former FBI Director James Comey, and for a lot of people, not a big surprise. The recognition that we have 2 tiers of justice in this country, one for the elites and then one for the rest of us. But many were saying, oh, now hold on here. This was a technical ruling, and there will be a, quote, fixed indictment that is going to be coming down the pike. During an interview, FBI Director Kash Patel also made remarks that some people find to be a bit of foreshadowing that won't be great for James Comey. He said that while the Department of Justice might be pursuing the appeal, they also had, quote, numerous options to proceed and were executing on all of those, saying, quote, so we're not done. I would say stay tuned for right after Thanksgiving, and you'll see multiple responses in my opinion. He also went on to say, or talk about the burn bags. These are bags that were discovered with documents in them that were slated to be burned, destroyed. And he has said that all of that information will be disclosed to the public. Quote, you're going to see everything we found in that room in one way or another, be it through investigation, public trial, or otherwise. Specifically, disclosure to the Congress. So whether it will be, I mean, I just honestly, I don't know that there can be any more damning evidence against Comey. Everything that has been revealed so far, it's pretty straightforward that he was conspiring to coordinate or at least help facilitate a coup. And he lied about it. I mean, he lied about certain aspects of it before Congress, including with whom he brought in on the conspiracy, particularly when it came to leaking information to the media and making statements before Congress to the contrary. So if there is more information that has yet to be disclosed, it'll be interesting to see what that is, or if it's going to be a redundancy. Not that that's a bad thing, but is it just going to be more information that proves what we already know? And according to Kash Patel, he said after Thanksgiving, much of this information, be prepared. He said he felt that if we may start seeing some of that in the days after Thanksgiving. Latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see a 60% chance of snow showers, freezing rain, and sleet likely before 3 p.m., and then a slight chance of snow showers after 5 p.m. Otherwise cloudy with a high near 32. Tonight a 50% chance of snow showers mainly before 8 p.m., and then cloudy with a low around 20. For your Tuesday, partly sunny with a high near 40, and taking a look at Wednesday, partly sunny with a high near 45.
Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you, Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air. I think winter is finally here. I'm looking outside, and it does look like we have just a tiny bit of snow out there. It's going to get pretty cold tonight, and then those temps, they are going to jump back into the 40s for the rest of the week. And I tell you that because if you're experiencing any type of issues with your heat, now is the time to get it looked at before we actually dip down into those 30s, the 20s, the teens, because that colder weather, it really is right around the corner. Don't wait until it's too late. I don't want you to be cold. The Foreman team, they can tackle anything from a simple service repair to a new unit install. They also have a 24/7 emergency service line if something does pop up. Outside of those normal business hours, make sure to call Russell and schedule your appointment. Also, I do want to mention that Russell is expanding his team and they are hiring for service techs, 1, maybe 2. So if you are in the HVAC industry looking to make a change, reach out to Foreman Mechanical and put your application in. You can do that at foremanmechanical.com. And of course, you can find all of the contact information for Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
This headline, Trump doubles down after calling Tim Walz, quote, seriously retarded. There's something wrong with him. Absolutely. You have a problem with it? Question mark. Now, this is all regarding this massive, massive fraud that apparently has been taking place for years and years in the state of Minnesota. And subsequent to this, whistleblowers have come out and said, we have been telling Tim Walz about this, and instead of working with us to clean up the fraud, he turned against us. And they are pointing the fingers to Walz, saying he's responsible for this. He has known about it. He has covered it up. Trump slammed, quote, the seriously retarded governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, for allowing hundreds of thousands of refugees from Somalia to invade his state and steal American land and culture on Thursday in a late-night Thanksgiving message following the terrorist ambush by a Biden illegal from Afghanistan against 2 West Virginia National Guardsmen in D.C. Trump went off on the unvetted immigration crisis and the, quote, retarded left-wing politicians like Tim Walz. Let's see here if I can get a larger quote from, I've got a couple of different stories here. In the Truth Social post, tore into Walz, accusing him of doing nothing, quote, either through fear, incompetence. The president said in the post, hundreds of thousands of refugees from Somalia are completely taken over the once great state of Minnesota. Somalian gangs are roving the streets looking for prey as our wonderful people stay locked in their apartments and houses, hoping against hope that they will be left alone. Now, here is Trump. Trump was being asked, I love when they follow up on this stuff, where essentially, did you really mean what you said? And here sorry about that. Let me get this audio cut off. So he was on Air Force One, and he was asked about using the term that some people find to be offensive, and that term is retarded.
That same post, you mentioned Tim Walz, and you called him what many Americans do find an offensive word, retarded. Do you stand by that claim of calling Tim Walz retarded?
Yeah, I think there's something wrong with him. Absolutely, sure.
You don't think that?
You have a problem with it? You know what? I think there's something wrong with him. Anybody that would do what he did, anybody that would allow those people into a state and pay billions of dollars out to Somalia. We give billions of dollars to Somalia. It's not even a country because it doesn't function like a country. It's got a name, but it doesn't function like a country. Yeah, there's something wrong with Walz.
Yeah, there's two aspects of this. One is just the importation of people from Somalia, but also the revelations of the massive amount of apparently very clear fraud that Tim Walz had been warned about, in which taxpayer dollars were not going where they were supposed to go, and instead were lining the pockets of corrupt individuals and or to terrorist organizations. 70 members of the Somali community in Minnesota involved in stealing $250 million in COVID funds that was supposed to feed children. Well, here's a question. Did those kids starve? Not to get too far off the beaten path here, but that's what we're always told this money is for. If the money didn't exist, children will die. They will starve to death. Is this not what we're told anytime there is a discussion about dollars that are going to feed hungry kids, for example? If it were to be cut off, that these kids would be in such dire situations they wouldn't be able to eat. So you're talking, that's 250, that's $250 million. How many kids died from that? How many kids starved to death because of it? If the answer is 0, then were those funds actually needed in the first place? I think that's a great follow-up question. Millions of dollars stolen from American taxpayers, many of which, or much of which, was sent overseas to Somalia. 80% of the money has not been recovered. 7 defendants were tried in connection with the scheme on charges related to stealing more than $40 million in taxpayer funds. 5 found guilty. However, the FBI is still investigating an attempt by a Somali woman to bribe one of the jurors with $120,000 in cash. The fraud goes deeper with multiple schemes, like the one that lasted over a 5-year period. Per the New York Times, federal prosecutors say that 59 people have been convicted in those schemes so far, and that more than $1 billion in taxpayer money has been stolen in 3 plots that they are investigating. Tim Walz was asked about this situation and the fact that he has presided as governor over all of this. You know what's going to come from this is, golly gee whiz, we had no idea. Should you really be in charge? If $1 billion tax dollars on your watch, I mean, how do you not notice that? You know, the starving children once again. Unless, of course, you did notice. Which we'll get to that point here in a moment. Whistleblowers saying Tim Walz absolutely knew about it and did everything he could to cover it up. Here he is being asked by Kristen Welker about his presiding over such fraud.
Dozens of people of East African descent have been charged, convicted, and sentenced for stealing more than $1 billion in taxpayer money from government programs during COVID. As you know, Governor, that is more than Minnesota spends each year to run its Department of Corrections. So I want to give you a chance to respond to this. Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to jail. We're doing everything we can. But to demonize an entire community on the actions of a few, it's lazy.
All right, and this is obviously one of the go-tos for Democrats. It is to try and cover up corruption by a group of individuals by saying that you're accusing everyone of doing it. Now, the bizarre nature of some of this response is, again, pretty standard for Democrats, and that's like, well, there are lots of people who steal stuff. I mean, come on, and we're just such a great state. We attract criminals. That's what you expect. Those are the standards of a Democrat-run state, that we do things so well. We've got that AAA bond rating and everything, and so that's just part of it. You're going to have Somali criminals come in and siphon off $1 billion taxpayer dollars for everything from luxury lifestyles to funding terrorism. That's just what you get when you have such a well-run state. And then again default on, well, you can't blame everybody in Somalia. Well, that's it. Different point. Now, the way that you keep the cash flowing to the corrupt, and here's where the the claims of every Somali is when you have people that say, okay, we need a better process. We need to make sure that tax dollars that are supposed to go to hungry kids, they were also autistic kids, which amazingly during this time there was a massive spike, like 800% in autism diagnosis amongst those in the Somali community. So it was clearly written all over the walls that there's fraud going on. And part of the reason that these things continue to happen is because when somebody who is a reasonable individual steps forward and says, we need to fix the process, they're accused of blaming the whole Somali community. And while you can't start starving kids just because of a few bad actors, we're going to take a break, and I want to share with you some of what whistleblowers are saying regarding Tim Walz's not only knowledge of this, but threat and intimidation campaign led by him to keep the whistleblowers from talking, which, of course, could be for a number of reasons. One, you just want to cover up your own incompetence, or two, maybe you're getting something out of this as well. I think it would be very interesting, and I'm sure somebody is going to look into this, to see if any of these individuals that were funneling this money away from the intended areas and then utilizing it for themselves and their own organizations, did any of those organizations somehow manage to donate money back to Tim Walz? Now, if they were smart and they were doing that, they would do it in a way that would make it very difficult to trace. But I find it really hard to believe that with $1 billion of fraud, the person who, according to whistleblowers, that was helping cover it up didn't get anything out of it. That's usually not how that works. Toss this over to traffic, then weather, and much, much more.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see a 60% chance of snow showers, freezing rain, and sleet likely before 3 p.m., and then a slight chance of snow showers after 5 p.m. Otherwise cloudy skies with a high near 32. Tonight a 50% chance of snow showers mainly before 8 p.m., and then cloudy with a low around 20. For your Tuesday, partly sunny with a high near 40, and taking a look at Wednesday, partly sunny with a high near 45.
Jazz hands Tim Waltz, according to these somewhat new, at least on a national scale, revelations that he presided over $1 billion of taxpayer fraud. His explanation is because he runs the state so well, criminals come there. And so that's just a sign that he is a great governor. I mean, if he were really, really great, $2 or $3 billion would be funneled off to line the pockets of fraudsters and terrorist organizations. But he could only hope to be that good. In the meantime, the Democrat Party will just have to be satisfied with the level of incredible governing that he has provided thus far, leading to the tune of $1 billion in fraud. In light of the fresh allegations of his complicity in the fraud, he's now exhibiting concern and taking action. However, employees of Minnesota's Department of Human Services employees are not allowing Waltz to use the actions alone as proof that he deserves to hold the governor's chair as he runs for re-election. While the organization thanked the New York Times for finally paying attention, where Minnesota's legacy media has not, they took to X to spill the tea on Tim Waltz's real action, which not only enabled the fraud to continue, but worked to target anyone who tried to make it right. Posting Tim Waltz is 100% responsible for massive fraud in Minnesota. We let Tim Waltz know of fraud early on, hoping for a partnership in stopping fraud, but no, we got the opposite response. Tim Waltz systematically retaliated against whistleblowers using monitoring, threats, repression, and did his best to discredit any fraud reports. Instead of partnership, we got the full weight of retaliation by Tim Waltz, certain DFL members, that's Democratic Farmer Labor, that's the name of the Democrat Party in Minnesota, certain DFL members, and an independent mainstream media. It is scary, isolating, and left us wondering who we can trust. In addition to retaliating against whistleblower Tim Waltz, disempowered the office of the legislative auditor, allowing agencies to disregard the audit findings and guidance. Media and politicians supporting Tim Waltz or the DFL agenda attacked whistleblowers who were trying to raise red flags on fraudulent activities. This is a cascade of systemic failures leading up to Tim Waltz. Agency leaders appointed by Tim Waltz willfully disregarded rules and laws to keep fraud reports quiet, even to the extent of threatening families of whistleblowers. These same leaders are not qualified for their jobs, instead getting leadership jobs via Tim Waltz's friendship, so state government was left floundering. DFL lawmakers refused to acknowledge fraud and deflected any serious conversations to stop the fraud. Biased mainstream media such as WCCO and NPR, that would be Minnesota Public Radio, showed absolutely no interest in covering fraud happening in our own state. Programs, especially in behavioral science and disability service, were built without any guardrails against fraud, all in an attempt to extract more funding from legislature and the federal government. As staff, we firsthand witnessed and observed fraud happening, yet we were shut down. We were reassigned, and we were told to keep quiet. Sometimes even more. Leadership did not want to appear to discriminate against certain communities and were unwilling to take action, such as stopping the fraud, that would have an adverse impact on their image. To date, no single agency leader has been held responsible for their role in fraud, whether it's Shireen Gandhi, Jess Geil, Jody Harpstein, Natasha Merce, Eric Ramdani, or others. It is a structure created and maintained by Tim Walz, who has created an environment of interrelated agencies and institutions, including the media, that help foster fraud through retaliation and turning a blind eye in exchange for political gain in the form of high-power agency leadership jobs or other perks. Fundamentally, they continued, Tim Walz is dishonest, lacks ethics and integrity, has poor leadership abilities, and has never taken any accountability for his role in the fraud. Instead, Tim Walz deflects by blaming national politics for his own failings and distracts the public with inveterate lying. These lies include his reference of a budget surplus under his tenure. Fact is, Minnesota never had a surplus. We had been given federal ARPA funds that were conflated as surplus money. Otherwise, we'd be in a deficit. And those ARPA funds, which were meant to be temporary funds, were used to create more leadership position for Tim Walz's buddies. As such, we can't fight fraud in Minnesota alone, hence why we're appealing to the federal levels of government. We need all of the help we can get as Tim Walz's agency leaders have upped their brazen approach in covering up their knowledge of fraud. We are grateful to the numerous solid politicians, especially the Fraud Committee, and media outlets who are trying to halt fraud. We are also grateful to other whistleblowers who are bravely stepping up. Thank you, New York Times, for bringing the plight of Minnesota to the national stage. As late to the game as they were. Now, as these whistleblowers have noted, this was not secret information. For years, they have been feeding this information to the media. Specifically in Minnesota, one of which is Minnesota Public Radio, you know, that great institution that does such a fantastic service for the people of the community. This was all known while he was running as vice president, or as the vice presidential candidate on the Kamala Harris ticket. This was all known information. And it is, while an indictment on Tim Walz and all of his buddies, that he, according to the whistleblowers, have been put into these positions of power and the way that they have gone after the whistleblowers. But it's yet again a reflection of an absolute corrupt media that is more interested in getting their people elected to power than they are actually doing their job and informing the public about what's actually going on. This is a massive story. And this is the guy that was, and I'm going to tell you something else. Kamala Harris knew about this. When you are vetting someone to be your running mate, you hire people to look up all the dirt you possibly can on them in order to determine whether or not it's going to be detrimental to the ticket. Even somebody who's as idiotic as Kamala Harris knows that that's the way it's done. Given that this information was widely available, though not reported on, the Harris campaign must have also known, they had to have known about all of this corruption. But they had a great deal of confidence in a corrupt media. So they knew that this isn't, or at least predicted, anything that would come back to haunt them. And so instead, we got all these stories about, golly gee whiz, what a down to, just, down home, folksy guy this Tim Walz is. I mean, he's just your typical Midwestern guy that likes to go out and hunt and teach, and he's just a regular guy in the governor's mansion. They knew. They knew. All along. It will be interesting to see how much traction, if any, this gets now that the New York Times finally decided to go ahead and report on this. As he runs for re-election, will this hurt him or will it help him? Because if there's one thing we know about Democrats, you can disassemble as to the reasons why, but the more corrupt someone is that they support, the more they support them. That has just consistently been a character trait of the Democrat Party in the last several, at least years, but probably further back than that. Once upon a time, if you could use Gary Hart as an example, even Joe Biden at one point had to drop out of the presidential race because he got caught plagiarizing. And that was enough for Democrat voters at the time. All those things today get you a boost in your numbers. I mean, you've got this guy who's a Democrat running in the primary up in Maryland for the U.S. Senate, and after it was discovered that he had an actual Nazi tattoo, he got an increase in support amongst Democrat voters. There's this nut job out of Tennessee. Not sure if you follow this race is tomorrow. There's a gal in Tennessee. This is a solidly red area. Trump won by like 20 points. And according to the most recent pollings, it's pretty much neck and neck. It's like a 2-point difference within the margin of error. And she's a certifiable nut job. She has openly talked about how much she hates the people in her district. She hates country music. She hates, just all these different aspects of Nashville. Recent videos surfaced showing her trying to storm into some state assemblyman's office, and when she was pulled out by police, she, as if she were an 8-year-old child throwing a tantrum, threw herself on the floor, squalling. And all of these things have seemingly only helped her amongst Democrats. We live in an odd time in which increasingly Republican voters are more about results, hence Donald Trump, and less about what the party tells them to do, and they will vote in defiance of the party because they want somebody that gets things done. And then you have the Democrat Party that is totally obedient and compliant to the elite power structure. They vote for whomever it is they're told, and then when they're told that vote didn't count, we're going to install someone for you, they dutifully stand in line in order to support that person next, and the more corrupt they are, the more support they get. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you. Winter weather, it's looming today. We're just getting a little taste of it, but the real winter weather, it will be here soon, and that's why now is the time to make sure your roof is ready before winter really does hit in full force, and that's where the Pyramid Roofing Company comes in. Pyramid, they use only high-quality materials, and they don't cut corners. They make sure that every roof includes ice and water shield in the eaves and in the valleys, the spots that kind of take the hardest beating during winter. That extra protection, it keeps your roof basically from leaking when the snow melts and refreezes, and then it tries to creep up underneath your shingles. And the Pyramid team, they offer free roof inspections. They'll get up there, they check everything out. They'll give you an honest assessment of what's going on, and then they'll work with you through that entire process. Plus, the Pyramid team, they also offer discounts for our military and our first responders on new roof installs. So if it is time to have the Pyramid team out to your home, reach out to Josh today. You can find all of the contact information for the Pyramid Roofing Company under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
The White House unveiled Melania's Christmas decorating, so it's an opportunity.
I bet it's classy.
Well, I'm sure the left will disagree. It seems like they aren't really on her as hard as they have been in the past for some reason. I don't know.
Well, just look at the previous administration. I was thinking about this the other day. Do you remember Christmas? I think it was like 2 years ago, where they had that like weird like tap dancer jazz thing. I don't know what it was.
Wasn't Jill even in it? Or maybe she wasn't in it.
Remember.
But I do remember talking. Yeah, it was just not Christmassy at all.
Yeah, it was just it was weird.
That's the left. It is the way their brains work. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's like if it's not weird, they feel as if it's not creative. Or you have to make it really weird in order to have created something new and beautiful. There's just this instinct to try and make things as weird as possible. Well, look at the Jaguar ad campaign. Remember that from a year ago? And just the weird. It's like weird stuff. Well, I keep going back where they were trying to say JD Vance was weird. Remember that whole marketing campaign where they thought if we just keep saying Republicans are weird and all in unison act like we just sort of stumbled upon that idea, then all of a sudden people will think that they're weird and we're not. And that did not work.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I'm sure it is. She's classy.
Home is where the heart is.
Yeah. Well, now, how is that supposed to make the unhoused feel? We should be thinking about the unhoused, how insensitive for her to say home is where the heart is when there are unhoused people running around because of Donald Trump.
The Red Room's focus is fostering the future, and it's an effort to support foster children. And the room's decor celebrates her Be Best initiative.
Well, plenty to rip on.
Yep.
But yeah, it does seem as if they've laid off her just a little bit this time around. I still feel this way. I do not believe that there is anyone in modern times that has been so unnecessarily bullied as Melania Trump. I say that now. People will say, "Bill, people they bully Michelle." I mean, just listen to her talk about it. But frankly, Michelle, she has said some really horrible things about Americans and talked about how she's never proud of this country until they chose her husband and how, Americans never gave them grace and kids are a bunch of fatties that need to have their caloric intake cut way down. I mean, she just invited it. Melania Trump just never says anything that is mean or unkind. And I mean, they just rip on that woman left and right. I don't know that there's anyone who has ever been as undeserving as the hateful vitriol that she has been subject to. But I will say it seems like they've laid off her just a little bit.
I agree.
I don't know if it's just because maybe their hatred and derangement for Trump is so great that they've become that laser focused that they can't even see family at this point. I'm really surprised that they haven't done more to just try and tear apart Barron as well.
Oh, I'm sure it's coming.
Yeah, at some point. I mean, there's a kid that can't make a single mistake. And just talking about weird, and you think about this story we were just talking about with Tim Waltz, and how, according to these whistleblowers, this guy is evidently in charge of and knew about and facilitated this massive taxpayer fraud scheme to the tune of over $1 billion. And it's like, how does... It's almost a satirical film storyline that this guy that is, by all accounts, visually a goofball. He prances around with jazz hands. He is he's kind of a Looney Tunes guy, yet somehow he manages to be governor, for numerous terms in Minnesota while being so corrupt, and people know about it. Like I said, this isn't new information. Now, it may be new to us nationally because it wasn't getting attention, but he severed whereas before when the auditor would come in and say, yeah, you're wasting all these taxpayer dollars, here's what you need to do. He changed it so you could ignore it. I mean, it was clear that he was doing what he could to protect his different entities of government underneath him while all this fraud was going on. And you can kind of, I don't know, when you are apparently that corrupt, you have this image in your mind that you are some sort of charismatic, calculated mastermind. And instead, he's like Elmer Fudd running around with jazz hands. It's the weirdest sort of marriage between goofball-esque personality trait and apparently just a huge fraud that presided over witness or whistleblower intimidation and billion-plus taxpayer dollars being siphoned away from autistic kids and hungry kids to go to terrorism and other things like that. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. Obviously, not everyone in government's corrupt, but we see what happens when they do exist, and it's never good for the taxpayers, never good for the whistleblowers, and that's the institution that is in charge of making your family decisions if you have not gotten that stuff legally nailed down. Ozarks Elder Law. Don't buy into this for $199. You can do it all on your own. Download it from the internet, and the government will say, oh, guess you outsmarted us. Not the way it works. Not planning at all or downloading something off the internet is not security. So whether it is your power of attorney for a loved one, special needs individual, or what happens to your things once you pass along, Ozarks Elder Law. Ladies in white, make sure you're taking care of. Consultations free, 10 area locations. All the details you need at ozarkselderlaw.com. Oh, so by the way, and we'll talk about it Thursday, but one of Christy Fulnecki's kids is the subject of a New York Post story that is continuing to get national attention. Headline, Oklahoma U student files discrimination report after flunking gender essay for psych class with trans instructor. We'll get that posted if you want to check it out. I don't think it's one of the best articles regarding it, but anyway, we'll I'm sure talk with Christy about this national coverage one of her kids is getting for fighting back against wokeness. Oh, and apparently I was wrong. They have already started coming after Barron. What the left is trying to stir up rumors that he's a homosexual.
That is correct.
Yeah. Why is it that the left always uses that as a way to try to insult political opposition? Do you know who could not care less if that were true? Trump supporters. If Barron turned out to be a homosexual, Trump supporters, MAGA world, could not care any less. It would be irrelevant to them. It is only something that the left loves to use as a reward or a weapon when it suits them. Glenn Beck's next. I'm Nick Reed.